I don't want this podcast to be a boring financial podcast, because who's really going to listen to that? Nobody. I know I personally wouldn't want to listen to something like that. But I want to make this short, sweet, and to the point. And I want this to be more about Biden and Kamala's policies regarding financial, economics, taxes, without making it like to the point where you're going to fall asleep. Now, a lot of people, like I always say, vote blindly, and they don't actually know policies about things that are going to happen or like affect them personally. They think, oh, my taxes won't be raised. That can't happen. That's not what he said, so he's not going to raise them. I mean, you would think by now, after watching the man speak, that you would see that a lot of stuff that he says, or that his puppeteers make him say, is not actually true. And he goes back on his word. Let's use the example of fracking. He's said he's going to frack, he's not going to frack, he's going to. Now he just got rid of the whole pipeline. And over 50,000 people lost their jobs in his first day of presidency. And because of this, we're now invading other countries for gas and oil, even though when under President Trump, we were self-sufficient in this category. So I don't know. That was in the first 24 hours of his presidency. I'm sure a lot of people don't follow enough to even know that. But that to me is a problem. 52,000 people. And then his rep that speaks to the press said, and I quote, "Go find another job." That makes me so angry. Obviously I don't work in that industry, but that makes me so angry that you went back on your word and then you told me go find a new job. The other thing that he's been mentioning a lot is this $15 minimum wage. And I posted a little bit about this on my Instagram, but I'm going to just go in more in depth into it right now. From afar, $15 minimum wage sounds great. You think, wow, okay, it's not livable, but it's better than what everybody has right now, which is not that much money. Unfortunately, though, just because he raises the minimum wage to $15 an hour doesn't mean that a business could afford to pay its employees that. So what's going to happen is employers, say an employer only has $10,000 a month to pay in payroll. Just because Biden raised it to $15 an hour doesn't mean that that person's going to afford that. So what he's going to do is let employees go. Employment's going to go up. And then the people that he still has working are going to have to work twice or three times as hard to make the same amount of money, like to take away from his payroll, which would be $10,000. He's not all of a sudden going to have more money to put towards payroll because Biden decided to raise the minimum wage. You get what I'm saying here? It's just not a good plan. On top of the fact that these businesses, and I'm a business owner, so I'm speaking as a business owner, were just hit by a pandemic. Of all times, now would not be the time to raise the minimum wage for these people. They have been through enough this last year. Enough. Now ain't the time for this. And to this day, I will always say this is exactly why we need somebody in the White House who knows finances and economics. Because obviously, this is simple math, but obviously he doesn't get it by doing this. Just because you raise the minimum wage doesn't mean that employers are going to be able to fork out the additional money now. But let's go with the fact that he did raise them. So don't forget that businesses will be forced to now raise their prices. I'm going to just make this real simple. Businesses are going to be forced to raise their prices. Inflation's going to rise, and the value of $1 is going to plummet. All because he raised the minimum wage. And in the end, you're going to need that minimum wage to go up again because now he's inflated prices. You get how that works? It's like super boring to explain in other ways. I'm trying to make it not as boring, but it's still going to come off pretty boring. And this is not my opinion. This can be proven through numbers. So I'm not saying this is an opinion. So keep that in mind. There is no such thing in a living wage. That's not a realistic term. Unfortunately, I wish there was, but there's not. Because prices go up, and when that happens, minimum wage will have to go up. That's a term made up so people working low-income jobs have a reason to, oh, I have a low-income job, or I'm not making a ton of money, but I really want that iPhone. Or I really want, I don't know, an expensive car, a TV, something like that. A lot of people think when he raises this minimum wage that it's not going to come back to the consumer. But it's going to. It'll come back to everybody because prices now are going to be inflated and have to go up to keep up with the demand that he just did for small businesses. Like I said, businesses don't have the money to have prices raised right now. So the only option they're going to have is to raise their prices to the consumer, which would be you. The best option is to leave the minimum wage as it is and for these people to go find different jobs or get educated in a different skill or something like that. There's no way that certain jobs should have an increased minimum wage. And let's be real, I've worked, like I've said in so many podcasts, I've worked in horrible, low-paying jobs. Horrible. I've worked in restaurants. I've bartended. There was one time where I literally worked for Dunkin' Donuts and got a check for 13 cents when I was working. 13 cents I got a check for it because I was getting paid only through tips. I was making like $2 an hour as a waitress or a bartender. And every once in a while you would get a check for, I guess the taxes would pretty much wash the check out that you would make. And every once in a while you'd get a check for like 5 cents, 6 cents, whatever. There are certain jobs that pay certain amounts of money, but not every job should be paying $15 an hour. And it sounds ridiculous because like I've said, I've worked in even like Chase Bank, JP Morgan, and was getting paid like shit. But because of that, I left and I found a better paying job. I feel like I could stay on this topic for a while, but I'm going to move on. The point of my ranting about this is that $15 an hour makes no sense when you look at the economics behind it. You have to understand how that works behind the $15 an hour. It's not that the prices are just going to go up for the employees. Everybody else is going to get hit with a raise now. Inflation is going to happen. So we have to understand how that works. I could go more about this in a separate podcast. But like I said, I don't want to stay on this topic for too long because I could really rant about this because it just aggravates me that nobody is smart enough to figure this out in government. So I'm going to just list. I'm going to talk about Kamala's economic policies first. And I'm just going to list them. I'm not going to go too much into them. This is her list of things that she wants to do. She wants to raise top income tax to 39.6%. She wants to raise corporate tax to 35%. 4% extra tax on $100,000 plus households, that would be husband and wife or whoever lives in that household combined, which is a lot of people. Financial transaction tax 0.2% on stocks and a financial transaction tax 0.1% on bonds. So I'm just going to leave that there for a second. I just wanted to say that really quickly. Now this is Biden's proposed tax plan. Increase corporate tax, increase payroll tax, very similar to Kamala's. Minimum wage increased to $15 an hour. We just talked about that. He wants to get rid of Trump's tax cuts for all brackets, which means everyone's taxes are going to go up. I know he said that in his campaign that certain people, if you make under a certain amount of money, your taxes won't go up, and people fell for that shit. But that's not true because he wants to get rid of Trump's tax cuts for all brackets. So this is going to affect everybody now. He wants to increase capital gains tax from 15 to 20% to 39.6%, which is ordinary income, plus 3.8% Obamacare tax. I'm going to get back to that in a second. Also, inheritance tax on unrealized gains. This has nothing to do about being Democrat or Republican. Where is the common sense with these policies and voting for a person, just based on this, if you just voted for him based on this policy? Where is the common sense? What would make you vote for somebody that has this tax plan? Whether it be Kamala or Biden. I don't understand why somebody would look at this and think that this is a good idea for anybody. Because everybody is going to be affected by this tax plan. If you make under a certain amount of money, you will still be affected by this tax plan. And if you believe that you wouldn't, you were lied to. Now, we all know I worked in that horrible, I worked in a couple financial jobs in my day, but the worst one was when I was doing, I was kind of working with a guy that did like a lot of talks about inheritance tax. So I do know a lot about this topic because I was sitting in these talks with him every week, multiple times a week. And I'm going to make this really simple. I'm going to give you guys an example of how ridiculous this inheritance tax example is. So let's say your parents bought a house for, say, $200,000 in the 90s. These are just made up numbers, but I have to use exact numbers or you're not going to get it. So $200,000 back in the 90s. Your parents oh my God, this is so sad, pass away, but you inherit the home. And that home is now worth $1 million. You would now owe on that $800,000 capital gain. First thing would be federal tax, 39.8%. Obamacare tax, which would be 3.8%. State and city in New York, New Jersey, it's about 11%. Florida is 0. I'm just going to throw that in there. So your total at the end of this, New York and New Jersey say, would be 54.6%, which would equal $436,000 or $800,000. If you can't afford the taxes, then you must sell the asset to cover your taxes, because your taxes alone will be almost $500,000. Also keep in mind that the income from your actual job will be taxed at the highest bracket because you'll be over the $400,000 for the year. So let's just talk about this for 1 second. A house that originally cost your parents $200,000. If you were to turn around and now pay taxes on this house, your taxes, because now say the home is worth $1 million, would be almost $500,000 under Biden's tax proposal. Most people don't have $500,000 sitting in the bank. So your only option at that point would be to turn around and sell the house. Now, this is just one example. There are many, many examples that I could give you, but I tried to make something that was kind of simple to understand. Kind of simple. I can't really make it more simple than this because you wouldn't even understand the point if I didn't use actual numbers. But I'm just giving you an example of how ridiculous this plan is. And the reason that I threw Florida in here is because Florida, we all know, is run by a Republican. And they have a 0% capital gain. So Florida, instead of 54.6%, you would only be about 43.6%, which is still terrible, still not good, but it's a lot less than this area that we live in. Because, we get fucked constantly. Now, let me just go back to my point here. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, like I always say, but we got to look at things like for what they are, not based on what the brainwashing news tells people to think. We all know that Biden and Kamala go back on what they say constantly. Like many politicians do. It's not just them. There's many people in politics that I feel like will say one thing and then actually do another. But when you vote for somebody, you have to look up who these people are as a person. If they look like fucking liars, they should not be getting your vote, because if they tell you, no, your taxes won't go up, and then they raise your taxes, what do? Because you just voted for them. I'm just so tired of stupid people saying stupid things like, he wouldn't do that, and now it's happening. He hasn't even been president for a week. Not 1 week has this man been president. And I can name about 10 things that he said that he's now gone back on that everybody thinks it's not going to affect them, but it will come back to you as the consumer in the end. But like I said on Instagram yesterday, I'm not even like annoyed anymore. I was like, everybody knows, I was like super pissed off about this whole thing, only because, politics aside, I don't like stupid fucking people. I don't like people who are ignorant and then talk a lot about a topic that they know nothing about. It's fine, like I always say, if you want to stay ignorant, but then please don't give me your opinion on things. But there's a lot of people that are like that vote. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, there's people on both sides that I think are sneaky. But I feel like this just like amplified every stupid person in the world who are saying that he's not going to do this, he's not going to do that. Then he does it and they ignore it. But they're paying higher taxes now with his new tax plan. Whether it's Kamala or Biden, they're both horrible. They're both horrible fucking plans. At the end of the day, nothing is free. So when Biden keeps writing, we're going to put $1 trillion into this and $1 trillion into that, the only way that that's going to get paid for is if your taxes go up. You will be paying for all the money he's sending out of the country. You will be paying when people lose their jobs, but he has people coming that are now going to be citizens in 20 days. You might think it doesn't affect you, but it will, because it's going to come back and you will be paying for all this stuff. Nothing in the world is free, ever, especially under an increased tax plan. So I hope this wasn't super boring. Like I said, I tried to make it like as non-boring as I could possibly make it, but it's a boring